The millionaire placed his order in German, solely to humiliate her. The waitress smiled silently. What he didn't know was that she spoke 7 languages, and one of them would change her life forever. The restaurant, the Golden Maple, gleamed with opulent splendor. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like artificial constellations, casting shimmering light onto white silk tablecloths and polished silver cutlery. It was the kind of place where the powerful came to celebrate their power, where money spoke louder than words, and where people like Clara Beaumont were invisible. Clara moved between tables, the tray perfectly balanced on her right hand. She had been working there for months, always with the same routine. Arrive early, clean, serve, smile, and go home with aching feet and her pride intact, because that was the only thing no one could take from her, her pride. That night, the restaurant was especially full. Business magnates, politicians, local celebrities all laughing, toasting, completely ignoring those who served them as if they were ghosts in aprons. Clara paused for a moment near the kitchen, breathing deeply. Chef Antoine Dubois observed her from his station, noticing something in her expression. "Are you all right, petite?" he asked with that gruff voice that always sounded like an embrace. "Yes, chef. It's just a long night. All nights are long when you work for people who think money makes them better than you." Antoine wiped his hands on his apron. "But remember what I always say. Dignity is priceless, and you have more dignity in one finger than all their combined wealth in their wallets." Clara smiled faintly. Antoine was one of the few who treated her like a person in that place. The others, including some colleagues, saw her as the quiet girl who never complained, who accepted meager tips and dismissive glances without a word. What no one knew was why she kept silent. What no one imagined was what she hid behind those dark eyes that observed everything with an intensity few noticed. The main door opened with that particular sound announcing the arrival of someone important. Clara instinctively turned and saw 2 men enter. The first was older, with perfectly combed back grey hair, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Clara's annual salary. He walked with the natural arrogance of those who have never had to worry about anything in life. The second was younger, perhaps in his late 30s, with the air of an heir who knows the world belongs to him by birthright. Both were laughing about something, while the restaurant manager practically ran towards them. "Mr. Sterling, what an honor to have you with us tonight. Your favorite table is ready. Victor Sterling." Clara had heard that name many times. He owned a chain of luxury restaurants across the region, invested in real estate, and, according to rumors, was a man who enjoyed humiliating those he considered inferior, which, by his standards, was basically everyone. "Patricia!" The manager approached Clara with a tense expression. "I need you to take table 7. It's the Sterlings." "Table 7. But Marcos always serves that one." "Marcos is busy, and they just arrived. Go now." Clara felt a knot forming in her stomach but nodded without protest. It was her job, and she needed that job more than anyone in that restaurant could imagine. She approached the table where the 2 men were already seated, still laughing at some private joke. When Clara arrived, neither of them looked at her. It was as if she were part of the furniture. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Golden Maple. My name is Clara, and I'll be your server tonight. May I start by offering you something to drink?" Victor finally looked up, but not to meet her eyes. He scanned her from head to toe with that look Clara knew too well. The look that evaluated, judged, and dismissed in seconds. "Look, Graham," he said to the younger man, his son, Clara recalled. "How kind of them to send us the prettiest one." Graham chuckled. "Though she probably can't even read the menu. Can she, father?" Both laughed. Clara maintained her professional smile, though inside she felt as if needles were piercing her chest. She had learned to endure these kinds of comments. She had learned that responding only made things worse. "What would you like to drink?" she repeated in a calm voice. Victor took the menu and pretended to study it with exaggerated attention. Then he looked at his son with a smile that promised nothing good. "You know, Graham, I haven't had fun in a while. This girl looks like the type who barely finished high school. I bet she knows nothing beyond, 'Here you go, sir, and thank you for the tip.'" "Father, don't be cruel," Graham said with false compassion. "Surely she can count. How else would she calculate the tips we never give her?" More laughter. Clara squeezed the pen in her hand so hard her knuckles turned white, but her face remained impassive. And then Victor did something that would change everything. He leaned forward with that predatory smile he used in million-dollar negotiations and began to speak in German. Not just any German, formal, technical, deliberately complex German. "Ich möchte eine Flasche von eurem teuersten Wein bestellen, aber ich bezweifle, dass dieses arme Mädchen überhaupt versteht, was ich sage. Wahrscheinlich denkt sie, Ich spreche Chinesisch. Clara clearly heard every word, every derogatory nuance. He had said he wanted a bottle of their most expensive wine, but he doubted this poor girl understood what he was saying. He probably thought he was speaking Chinese. Graham burst into laughter, pounding the table with his palm. "Father, you're terrible. Look at her face. She has no idea what you said." "Of course not." Victor leaned back in his chair, visibly pleased with himself. These people barely know English. German, please, you'd need a real education for that, one she clearly never had. Clara remained motionless, her heart pounded, but not from shame. It was something different, something she had learned to control during years of practice, because Clara had understood every word, every insult, disguised as a foreign language, but she said nothing. Not yet. "Say." Victor pointed at her as if she were a specimen for study. "She doesn't even blink. She's probably thinking about what TV show she'll watch when she gets to her miserable little home." Clara took a deep breath. Her Grandma Eleanor's words echoed in her mind like a whisper from the past. True power isn't in showing what you know, but in knowing when to show it. Grandma Eleanor, the woman who had taught her everything she knew, the woman who for decades had worked as a translator for embassies, but had never received official recognition because she lacked university degrees. The woman who spoke 9 languages fluently and had passed that gift on to Clara since she was a child. 7 languages. Clara spoke 7 languages with perfect fluency: German, French, English, Portuguese, Italian, Mandarin, and of course, Spanish. Each one learned in her grandmother's kitchen, on long nights listening to recordings, in the worn books her grandmother kept like treasures, but no one knew, because Clara had learned that in a world that judged by appearances, showing your hand too soon was a fatal mistake. "Well," Victor switched to English with a bored expression, "since it's obvious you don't understand anything useful, I'll tell you simply. Bring us a bottle of the Chateau Margaux 2005 and make sure it's at the correct temperature, if they even know what that means here." "Of course, sir. I'll be right back." Clara retreated with measured steps, her mind processing everything that had just occurred. It wasn't the first time she had been humiliated. It wouldn't be the last. But something in the deliberate cruelty of that man, in his need to feel superior by using a language he believed she didn't understand, ignited something within her. In the kitchen, Antoine waited for her with a worried expression. "I saw your face when you came back. What did those guys do to you?" "Nothing I haven't heard before." "Clara, you don't have to put up with this. There are other jobs. There are no other jobs that pay enough for Grandma's medicine, chef. You know that." Antoine sighed. He knew Clara's situation. He knew her grandmother was ill, that medical bills were piling up, that Clara worked double shifts just to survive. "What did they say to you?" Clara hesitated for a moment. "The older one spoke in German. He thought I wouldn't understand. He said horrible things about me." Antoine's eyes widened. "And you?" "I understood every word." A heavy silence fell between them. Antoine knew some things about Clara that others didn't. He knew she was different, special in some way she never fully explained. "What are you going to do?" Clara picked up the bottle of wine Victor had ordered and placed it on the tray. "For now, my job. After that, we'll see." She returned to the table with the bottle, presenting it to Victor as protocol dictated. He barely glanced at it, making a dismissive gesture with his hand for her to pour. As Clara poured the wine with perfect precision, Victor spoke to his son in German again. "Seht ihre Hände an, rau und benutzt. Das ist das Leben der Unterschicht. Arbeiten bis sie sterben, ohne jemals etwas Wichtiges zu erreichen." He was commenting on Clara's hands, saying they were rough and worn, that this was the life of the lower class, working until they die, without ever achieving anything important. Graham nodded, adding in the same language, "Wenigstens hat sie ein hübsches Gesicht. Das ist wahrscheinlich das Einzige, was sie am Leben hat. At least she has a pretty face. It's probably the only thing she has in life." Clara finished serving, maintaining her neutral expression, but inside, something was changing. A decision was forming, one she had avoided for years, but which now seemed inevitable. "Would you like to order dinner?" she asked in perfect English. "Bring the best you have," Victor said, not even looking at the menu, "and I expect it to be truly the best. I know the owners of this place. One mistake and you'll be out of a job. Understood, miss?" "Understood, sir." Clara withdrew again, but this time she stopped in a corner of the restaurant where she could observe the table without being seen. The Sterlings continued laughing, speaking in German about business, about people they had ruined, about employees they had fired for fun. And then she heard something that made her blood run cold. Victor mentioned the name of a hospital, the same hospital where her grandmother was being treated. He spoke about an investment he was considering, about how he planned to buy part of the hospital and optimize costs, which, in his language, meant cutting services for patients who couldn't afford luxury treatments. Die Alten und Kranken, die sich keine Privatversicherung leisten können, sind sowieso eine Last für das System, he said coldly. Wenn wir übernehmen, werden wir diese unprofitablen Abteilungen schließen. The old and sick who cannot afford private insurance are a burden on the system anyway. When we take over, we will close those unprofitable departments. Clara felt the world stop. Her grandmother depended on that hospital, on those unprofitable departments this man wanted to close, on doctors and nurses who treated patients regardless of how much money they had. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper. A silent fury she had kept contained her entire life began to overflow, but she wouldn't act impulsively. That wasn't what her grandmother had taught her. The right moment, she whispered to herself. Everything has its right moment. She returned to the kitchen, where Patricia, the manager, awaited her with a serious expression. Clara, the Sterling gentlemen have specifically asked to speak with you. I don't know what you've done, but you'd better not have ruined anything. Clara's heart raced. Had they discovered her? Had they noticed something in her expression that betrayed her understanding? She walked towards the table with firm steps, preparing for whatever was to come. Victor awaited her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sit, he ordered, gesturing to an empty chair. Sir, employees aren't permitted. I said, sit. Clara obeyed slowly, feeling the stares of the entire restaurant upon her. This was unusual, completely out of protocol. Victor leaned forward, studying her as if she were an insect under a microscope. My son and I have been observing you all night. There's something different about you, something I can't quite identify. And that bothers me because I always identify people. Clara didn't respond, just looked him directly in the eyes, something that clearly made him uncomfortable. I'm going to make you an offer, Victor continued. I need staff for my restaurants. People who know how to serve, who are discreet, who don't cause problems. I'd pay triple what you earn here. It was a trap. Clara knew it. Men like Victor didn't make generous offers without expecting something in return. That's very kind, sir, but I'm fine where I am. Victor's smile froze. No one said no to him. Excuse me? I said I appreciate the offer, but I prefer to stay here. Graham let out an incredulous laugh. Did you hear that, father? The waitress is rejecting your offer. Victor narrowed his eyes. I don't think you understand your position, young lady. I'm not asking you. I'm telling you what you're going to do. And I'm telling you, with all due respect, that my answer is no. The silence that followed was so dense it could be cut with a knife. Nearby diners had stopped talking, observing the scene with a mixture of horror and fascination. Victor stood up slowly, his imposing height casting a shadow over Clara. You're going to regret this. His voice was low, dangerous. No one says no to me, especially someone like you. Clara also stood, surprising herself with her own audacity. Someone like me, she repeated. And what am I exactly, Mr. Sterling? A nobody. A waitress who doesn't know her place in the world. Clara smiled for the first time all night. She smiled genuinely. You're right about one thing, sir. I am a waitress. But you're wrong about everything else. She turned to leave, but Victor's voice stopped her. Du wirst bereuen, zur Arbeit gekommen zu sein. Ich werde dafür sorgen, dass du nie wieder in dieser Stadt arbeitest. You'll regret having come to work tonight. I'll make sure you never work in this city again. Clara stopped, her back to him, her heart pounding. The moment had arrived. She turned slowly, looking him directly in the eyes. And then, in perfect German with an impeccable accent, she replied, Ich verstehe jedes Wort, das Sie heute Nacht gesagt haben, Herr Sterling. Jede Beleidigung, jeden Plan. Und ich verspreche Ihnen, der Einzige, der etwas bereuen wird, sind Sie. I understand every word you've said tonight, Mr. Sterling. Every insult, every plan. And I promise you, the only one who will regret anything will be you. The expression on Victor's face was something Clara would never forget. The color drained from his face. His eyes widened with a mixture of shock and disbelief. Graham dropped his wineglass, the red liquid spilling over the white tablecloth like blood on snow. Clara turned and walked towards the kitchen, leaving behind the stunned silence of the city's most exclusive restaurant. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know what consequences her actions would have. But for the first time in a long time, she felt free. What she didn't know was that this night was only the beginning. That Victor Sterling was not the kind of man who accepted humiliation, and that the war that had just begun would reveal secrets that would change not only her life, but the lives of everyone involved. Because in that restaurant, under the lights of the crystal chandeliers, a spark had been ignited, that would soon become a fire, and Clara Beaumont was ready to burn. The kitchen doors closed behind Clara, with a dull thud that resonated like the end of one chapter and the beginning of a much darker one. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her temples, in her wrists, in every part of her body that trembled with a mixture of adrenaline and terror. What had she done? Antoine was the first to reach her side, taking her shoulders with firm hands. "Clara, what happened out there? The whole restaurant is silent. I've never seen anything like it." I answered him. Clara's voice was barely a whisper. In German. I told him I understood everything. Antoine's eyes widened. "You answered Victor Sterling to his face, in German?" Before Clara could respond, the kitchen doors burst open violently. Patricia Jenkins, the manager, entered, her face contorted with fury and panic. "Clara, what the hell did you do? Mr. Sterling is furious. He's demanding to speak with the owners right now." "Patricia, he was humiliating me. He thought I didn't understand." "I don't care what he thought," Patricia interrupted her sharply. "Do you have any idea who that man is? Do you have the slightest idea what he can do to us?" Clara felt the kitchen walls closing in on her. The other employees looked at her with expressions ranging from compassion to resentment. Some seemed impressed by what she had done, but most were simply scared. "Patricia," Antoine intervened, "whatever happened, Clara is one of our best employees. We can't." "Silence, Antoine. This is none of your business." Patricia turned to Clara with eyes that dripped coldness. "You're suspended, without pay, until the owners decide what to do with you. Now get out through the back door. I don't want Mr. Sterling to see you leave." Clara felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Suspended, without pay. The words echoed in her mind as she thought of her grandmother's medicine, the outstanding bills, the rent due in days. "Patricia, please, I need this job. My grandmother is sick, and you should have thought of that before you decided to play the hero." Patricia pointed to the back door. "Out, now." Clara looked into Antoine's eyes, hoping to find some support, but he could only lower his gaze helplessly. There was nothing he could do, not against the manager, not against the weight of the Sterling name. With trembling hands, Clara removed her apron and left it on the stainless steel table. She walked towards the back door, feeling each step as if she were walking towards a precipice. Outside, the alley was dark and smelled of garbage and dampness. Clara leaned against the brick wall, letting the tears she had held back finally run down her cheeks. What was she going to do now? Her phone vibrated in her pocket. It was a text message from an unknown number. "You made a very serious mistake tonight, and mistakes come with a price. Sincerely, someone who will be watching you." A shiver ran down her spine. Victor, Graham, someone who worked for them. The message was clearly a threat, but what more could they do to her that they hadn't already? The answer would come sooner than she imagined. Clara walked through the empty streets towards the bus stop. At that hour, public transport was scarce, and she had to wait almost 40 minutes in the dark, constantly looking over her shoulder, feeling someone watching her from the shadows. When she finally arrived at her small apartment on the outskirts of the city, she found her grandma Eleanor awake, sitting in her favorite chair by the window, looking at the distant city lights. "You're home early, my dear." Grandma Eleanor's voice was weak, but warm, as always. "Did something happen?" Clara knelt beside her grandmother, taking her wrinkled hands in hers. How could she tell her the truth? How could she explain that she had lost the job that allowed them to survive? "Grandma, I did something tonight. Something I perhaps shouldn't have." Eleanor's eyes, though tired from illness, shone with that sharp intelligence that age had not managed to extinguish. "Tell me everything, Clara. Don't omit anything." And Clara did. She told her about the Sterlings, about the humiliations in German, about the plans to buy the hospital, about her response and the consequences that followed. When she finished, she expected to see disappointment on her grandmother's face. Instead, she saw pride. "You did well, my dear." Eleanor squeezed Clara's hands with surprising strength. "You did exactly what you had to do. But Grandma, I lost my job. I don't know how we're going to." "Listen to me," Eleanor interrupted her firmly. "I spent my whole life being silent, my whole life being invisible so that people like that Sterling could feel superior. I translated for ambassadors, for presidents, for people who governed entire countries, and none of them knew my name. None thanked me. None saw beyond the woman who served coffee and translated their words. Tears now ran down both their cheeks. I don't want that for you, Clara. I don't want you to live your life in silence. You have a gift that I gave you with all my love, and that gift is not for hiding, it is for using, to defend yourself, to defend others who cannot defend themselves." Clara hugged her grandmother, feeling the fragile body under her arms. the bones that protruded where there had once been firm flesh, the heart that beat weakly, but with unbreakable determination. "I'm scared, Grandma. That man has power. He can destroy us. Power without honor is just noise, my dear, and noise, no matter how loud, eventually fades." That night, Clara barely slept. Her mind replayed the restaurant events again and again. Victor's words, the threat of the text message, the uncertainty of the future. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the millionaire's face transforming from mockery to fury when she spoke in German. The next day, the reality of her situation became even clearer. When she tried to call the restaurant to speak with Patricia, no one answered. When she went in person, the security guard prevented her entry, saying she was no longer welcome. "I'm sorry, miss." The guard, an older man who had always treated her well, seemed genuinely apologetic. "Orders from above. I can't let you in. But my things, my last pay, they told me they'll mail them to you, along with your termination letter." Termination letter? Not just suspended, fired. Clara walked through the city in a daze. What was she going to do now? She had savings for perhaps 2 weeks. After that, she didn't want to think about after. Her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but different from the threat last night. Clara Beaumont? A male voice. Professional, cold. "Yes, that's me. This is David Chen, lawyer for Sterling Group. My client wishes to meet with you this afternoon. It's an urgent matter." Clara's heart stopped for a second. "Meet with me? For what?" "That will be discussed in person. You have 1 hour to present yourself at the corporate offices of Sterling Group. The address will be sent to you by message. I strongly suggest you do not fail to appear." The call disconnected before Clara could respond. Minutes later, she received the address, an office building in the financial district, the kind of place where people like her normally only entered to clean floors. Part of her wanted to ignore the summons, but another part, the part her grandmother had raised to never run from problems, knew she had to go. She had to know what they wanted. She had to face whatever came. She changed into the best clothes she had, a simple white blouse, a dark skirt, shoes she had bought at a second-hand store, but that still looked presentable. She looked at her reflection in the mirror and took a deep breath. "I can do this," she whispered. "I can do this." The Sterling Group building was a tower of glass and steel that rose into the sky like a monument to the power of money. Clara entered through the revolving doors and found herself in a lobby that was larger than her entire apartment. The receptionist, an impeccably dressed woman with an expression of professional boredom, looked her up and down with that scrutiny Clara knew too well. "May I help you?" "I have an appointment. My name is Clara Beaumont." Something changed in the receptionist's expression. Recognition, curiosity, pity. "Of course, they're expecting you. 27th floor. The elevators are to your right." The elevator ascended in silence, the numbers changing on the digital screen like a countdown to something inevitable. When the doors opened on the 27th floor, Clara found herself facing another receptionist. This one even more intimidating than the previous one. "Miss Beaumont, this way, please." She was guided down a hallway with walls covered in art that probably cost more than Clara would earn in her lifetime. At the end of the hallway was a dark wooden double door. The receptionist knocked softly, and a voice from inside said, "Come in." Victor Sterling's office was exactly what Clara expected. Enormous, ostentatious, designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city spread below like a kingdom waiting to be conquered. And there he was, sitting behind a mahogany desk that seemed like an altar to his own ego. Beside him, Graham, with that same contemptuous smile from the night before, and in a corner, a man in a grey suit who must have been the lawyer who had called her. "Miss Beaumont." Victor didn't stand, didn't even make a gesture to greet her. "How kind of you to accept our invitation." It didn't feel like an invitation, it felt like an order. Graham chuckled, but his father raised a hand to silence him. "Direct. I like that. Although sincerity can be dangerous when you don't have power to back it up." Victor leaned back in his chair. "But I didn't call you to exchange pleasantries. I called you because we have a problem. And problems, in my experience, have 2 solutions. They are eliminated or they are controlled." Clara felt a chill, but maintained her neutral expression. "And I'm a problem for you? You have been since last night. You see, I don't care that you understand German. In fact, it's impressive. But what I do care about is that you heard things you shouldn't have heard." Clara's heart raced. The plans about the hospital, the business conversations. What else might Victor have said, thinking no one understood? "I don't know what you're referring to." "Of course you do." Victor leaned forward. You heard about my plans for Maplewood General Hospital. Plans that are confidential. Plans that could be affected if someone with the wrong contacts found out prematurely. I don't have contacts of any kind. I'm just a waitress. You were a waitress, Graham interjected with malice. Now you're nothing. Graham, silence. Victor didn't take his eyes off Clara. Here's my offer, Miss Beaumont. Unique and non-negotiable. You are going to sign a confidentiality agreement. You will not speak to anyone about what you heard last night. In return, you will receive generous compensation, enough to pay for your grandmother's treatment for a year, and a letter of recommendation that will open doors for you at any restaurant in the city. Clara blinked. How did he know about her grandmother? How did he know about the treatment? I see you're surprised. I know about your grandma Eleanor. Victor smiled without warmth. I did my research this morning. I know where you live. I know where she receives treatment. I know how much you owe in medical bills. Knowledge is power, Miss Beaumont, and I have plenty of both. The lawyer approached with a folder, placing it on the desk in front of Clara. Inside was a multi-page document and a check. Clara looked at the check. The amount was more money than she had ever seen in her life. Enough to pay for everything. Enough to breathe easy for the first time in years. But something wasn't right. Something in Victor's expression. Something in the way Graham looked at her with anticipation, as if they expected her to fall into a trap. And if I don't sign? The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unpronounced threats. If you don't sign, Victor spoke slowly, savoring each word. I will make your life impossible. You already lost your job at the Golden Maple. I can ensure you don't work in any restaurant in this city, in this country, if I put my mind to it. And your grandmother's treatment at Maplewood General, well, let's just say that when I complete my acquisition of the hospital, certain patients might find their beds are no longer available. Clara felt nauseous. It wasn't an offer. It was blackmail, extortion disguised as generosity. You're threatening me. I'm giving you options. There's a difference. Clara's hands trembled as she looked at the document. The words swam before her eyes. Legal clauses, complicated terms, all designed to silence her permanently. She thought of her grandmother, of her smile when she said she was proud, of her words about not living life in silence. She thought of the voices she had heard Victor mention, the people who would be affected if he bought the hospital, the patients who would lose their care, the families who would suffer. She thought of everything she had learned throughout her life, every language, every word, every lesson about dignity and courage, and she made a decision. No, she said in a firm voice. Victor frowned. Excuse me? I said no. I'm not going to sign this. Graham stood up. Are you crazy? Do you have any idea what you're rejecting? I have a perfect idea. Clara also stood, looking directly into Victor's eyes. I'm refusing to be bought. I'm refusing to be silenced. And I'm refusing to be part of whatever you people plan to do with that hospital. You're going to regret this. Victor's voice was pure ice. I'm going to destroy you and everything you care about. Clara walked towards the door, but before leaving, she turned one last time. Herr Sterling, she said in perfect German, Sie haben Ihr ganzes Leben lang Menschen wie mich unterdrückt, aber diesmal haben Sie sich mit der falschen Person angelegt. Ich werde nicht schweigen, und wenn ich falle, werde ich nicht allein fallen. Mr. Sterling, all your life you have oppressed people like me, but this time you picked a fight with the wrong person. I will not be silent, and if I fall, I will not fall alone. She left the office without looking back, her heart pounding, her legs barely holding her up. She didn't know how she was going to keep that promise. She didn't know what resources she had against a man with Victor Sterling's power. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The war had officially begun, and Clara Beaumont had no intention of losing it. What she didn't know was that same afternoon, while she was returning home to embrace her grandmother and plan her next move, Victor Sterling was making a call that would change everything. I need you to thoroughly investigate that girl, he said into the phone with an icy voice. I want to know every secret, every weakness, every person she cares about, and when you have everything, we will destroy her completely. On his computer screen shone a photo of Clara taken by the building's security cameras, and next to it, a photo of Grandma Eleanor entering Maplewood General Hospital for her weekly treatment. The battle for dignity was about to become a fight for survival. The walk back home was the longest Clara had ever taken. Each step weighed like lead. Each breath was a conscious effort not to collapse in the middle of the street. She had defied a giant, and now that giant was preparing to crush her. When she opened the door to her small apartment, she found something she didn't expect. Her Grandma Eleanor was not in her chair by the window. She was standing, leaning on her cane, with an old suitcase open on the bed. "Grandma, what are you doing? You shouldn't be up for so long." "I'm looking for something, my dear." Eleanor spoke with a determination Clara hadn't heard in months. "Something I should have shown you a long time ago." Clara approached, worried about the effort her grandmother was making. The illness had weakened her body, but clearly had not touched her spirit. "Grandma, please, sit down. Whatever it is, I can find it." "No, I have to find this myself." Eleanor's wrinkled hands rummaged through the contents of the suitcase. Yellowed papers, old photographs, letters in time, worn envelopes. Finally, her fingers closed around a worn but carefully preserved brown leather folder. "Here it is." Eleanor sank onto the bed, breathing with difficulty. "Sit down, Clara. What I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about our family." Clara obeyed, her heart pounding with a mixture of curiosity and fear. What secrets could her grandmother be keeping? What did it have to do with what was happening now? "Many years ago, before you were born, I worked as a translator for diplomatic families," Eleanor began, her voice transporting her to decades past. "I didn't have degrees, but I spoke 9 languages. I learned them the same way I taught you, by listening, practicing, living among people from all over the world. I already know that, Grandma. What you don't know is who I worked for during the last years of my career as a translator." Eleanor opened the folder and took out a black and white photograph. In it appeared a much younger version of herself, elegantly dressed, next to a man in a suit Clara didn't recognize. This man was Arthur Sterling, Victor's father. Clara felt as if the ground opened beneath her feet. "You worked for the Sterlings?" "For 5 years. I was his personal translator in all international negotiations. Arthur built his empire with my help, translating contracts, closing deals, facilitating communications with partners from all over the world." Tears began to form in Eleanor's eyes as she continued. "Arthur was different from his son. He was ambitious, yes, but he had honor. He treated me with respect. He even promised me that when he retired, he would give me a share of the profits from the businesses I had helped build. I had signed documents, legal agreements. And what happened? Arthur died suddenly. A heart attack, they said. And when I went to claim what was due to me, I met Victor. He was barely 25 then, but he was already the cruel man you know now." Eleanor took another document from the folder. It was a contract with official signatures and seals. "This is the original agreement. Arthur promised me 5% of the Sterling Group's profits as compensation for my years of service. But when I showed it to Victor, he laughed in my face." Eleanor's voice broke with the memory. "He told me that a domestic employee had no right to anything, that if I tried to claim legally, he would use all his power to destroy me. And he did. He hired lawyers who invalidated the contract, claiming I had no legal capacity to sign agreements of that nature. They took everything from me, my reputation, my savings, my dignity." Clara took her grandmother's hands, feeling the injustice of decades concentrate in that moment. "Why did you never tell me?" "Because I was ashamed. Ashamed of having been so naive. Ashamed of not having been able to defend myself. And fear, Clara, fear that if someday you crossed paths with the Sterlings, they would discover who you were and harm you. But now they know who I am." "Exactly." Eleanor squeezed Clara's hands tightly. "That's why you need to know the complete truth, because there's something else in this folder, something Victor doesn't know I have." She pulled out a thick envelope sealed with old wax. "During my years working for Arthur, I translated many documents. Some of them were delicate, businesses that weren't exactly legal, agreements with people who preferred to remain in the shadows." "What kind of businesses?" "The kind that would destroy the Sterling Group's reputation if they came to light. Arthur made me swear I would never reveal what I knew, and I kept my promise while he lived. But Victor broke all the promises his father made me, so I no longer have an obligation to keep their secrets." Clara looked at the envelope as if it contained a bomb. In a sense, it did. "Grandma, are you sure about this? If Victor finds out you have this, I no longer care what happens to me, Clara. I'm old, I'm sick, but you have a whole life ahead of you, and I'm not going to let that man take it from you as he took mine." Clara's phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Clara Beaumont," a female voice, professional, but warm. "Yes." "Who is this?" "My name is Sarah Miller. I'm a journalist with the National Daily. I heard about what happened at the Golden Maple last night. I'd like to speak with you." Clara's heart raced. How had a journalist found out so quickly? "How did you get my number?" "I have my sources, but that's not what's important. What's important is that I have information about Victor Sterling that I think will interest you." and I think you have information that interests me. Can we meet?" Clara looked at her grandmother, who had heard the entire conversation. Eleanor nodded slowly. "Where and when?" "Tomorrow, at the Café Esperanza near Central Square, at 10 inches the morning. And Miss Beaumont, please come alone and don't tell anyone about this call." The communication cut off. Clara stood there, looking at the phone, processing what had just happened. "Who was that?" Eleanor asked. "A journalist. She says she has information about the Sterlings." "It could be a trap." "I know, but it could also be our only chance." That night, Clara couldn't sleep. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions, fears, and possibilities. She read the documents her grandmother had given her, each page revealing a story of corruption, manipulation, and cruelty that spanned decades. But there was something else among the papers, something her grandmother hadn't mentioned directly. A letter written in German addressed to Arthur Sterling from a European business partner. The letter spoke of a secret agreement, of money transferred to offshore accounts, of political favors bought and sold. Clara translated every word, feeling the puzzle begin to take shape. The Sterlings hadn't built their empire solely with hard work and business acumen. They had built it on lies, bribes, and the exploitation of people like her grandmother. The next morning, Clara prepared for the meeting with the journalist. Before leaving, her grandmother stopped her. "Take this with you." She handed her a small silver locket. "It was your mother's. She also had your courage. Rose died young, but she lived fearlessly. I want you to remember that today." Clara hugged her grandmother tightly, feeling the fragility of her body, but also the strength of her spirit. "I'll be back soon, Grandma. I promise." "I know you will, my dear, but if something goes wrong, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. I always was, from the day you were born." The Café Esperanza was a modest place on a quiet city corner. Small tables, walls decorated with old photographs, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee floating in the air. Clara arrived 10 minutes before the agreed time and chose a table in the corner from where she could see the entrance door. Sarah Miller arrived punctually. She was a woman in her 40s with dark hair tied back in a practical bun and eyes that seemed to analyze everything around her. She dressed simply but professionally and carried a leather briefcase worn from use. "Miss Beaumont," she sat across from Clara without preamble. "Thank you for coming. Before we talk about anything, I need to know how you found out what happened." Sarah smiled slightly. "I have a source inside the Golden Maple. Someone who witnessed everything that happened that night and is very tired of seeing how the Sterlings treat people." "Who?" "That I cannot reveal. Source protection. But what I can tell you is that it's not the first time Victor Sterling has humiliated employees in that way. And it's also not the first time he's destroyed the life of someone who dared to challenge him." Sarah opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I've been investigating Sterling Group for 3 years. I have testimonies from unfairly dismissed former employees, from competitors ruined by illegal tactics, from public officials bribed to favor their businesses. But I've never been able to publish anything because every time I get too close, someone threatens me or my sources disappear." "Disappear?" "Not literally, but they suddenly change their minds, move out of town, decide they don't want to talk anymore. The Sterling's power reaches very far, Miss Beaumont, further than you imagine." Clara thought of the documents her grandmother had given her, of the letters, the contracts, the decades of secrets. "Why are you looking for me?" "Because you did something no one else has done. You confronted him publicly. And not only that, you confronted him in his own language. Literally, that makes you a symbol, and symbols are powerful." "I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to protect my family." "I understand that, but sometimes the best way to protect our family is by exposing those who threaten us." Sarah leaned forward. "Miss Beaumont, I'm preparing a report that could destroy the Sterlings, but I need more evidence. Solid evidence they cannot deny or buy. Do you have anything like that?" Clara hesitated. Trusting a stranger was risky, but going alone against the Sterlings was suicide. "I have documents," she finally said. "Documents my grandmother kept for decades, contracts, letters, agreements that prove illegal activities." Sarah's eyes lit up with interest. "What kind of activities?" "Bribes, tax evasion, agreements with people who operated outside the law, all translated and documented by my grandmother when she worked for Arthur Sterling. My grandmother worked for the Sterlings for 5 years, and when Arthur died, Victor stripped her of everything legally due to her." Sarah leaned back in her chair, processing the information. "This is bigger than I thought, much bigger. There's something else." Clara took a deep breath. "Victor is planning to buy Maplewood General Hospital. He wants to close the departments that care for patients without resources. My grandmother receives treatment there. Do you have proof of that? I heard it directly from his mouth in German. He thought no one understood. Sarah took a recorder from her briefcase. Would you be willing to give a recorded testimony, to tell everything you know, including about your grandmother? Clara thought of Eleanor, of her tired but proud smile, of the decades of silence she had endured, of the opportunity to finally get justice. Yes, I'm willing. For the next 2 hours, Clara spoke, telling everything. The night at the restaurant, the humiliations in German, the meeting at Sterling Group offices, the blackmail, the threats, and then she told her grandmother's story. Every word was like taking a weight off her soul. When she finished, Sarah put away the recorder with a serious but hopeful expression. This is enough to start, but I need to see those original documents. Can you get them for me? I'll have to talk to my grandmother. They're hers, not mine. I understand, but do it soon. The Sterlings won't sit still. If they find out we're working together, they'll try to stop us. Clara nodded, getting up to leave. But before she could take a step, Sarah stopped her. One more thing, Miss Beaumont. Last night I received an anonymous call. Someone warned me to be careful with you, that you were dangerous, unstable, that nothing you said could be trusted. Clara's stomach churned. Who called? They didn't leave a name, but I recognized the number. It was from Graham Sterling's personal cell phone, so it was him. Graham had been the one who sent the threatening message the night of the restaurant. Graham was trying to discredit her before she could defend herself. And why did you decide to meet with me anyway? Sarah smiled. Because in my experience, when someone like Graham Sterling tries to destroy a person's reputation before meeting them, it means that person has something they fear, and I want to know what it is. Clara left the cafe with a mixture of hope and terror. She had an ally, she had a plan, but she also had powerful enemies who were willing to do anything to silence her. As she walked towards the bus stop, her phone vibrated with a text message. It was from Antoine, the chef. Clara, I need to see you urgently. I found out something about the Sterlings you need to know. It's about your grandmother. Please come to the restaurant after 11 p.m. when it's closed. Enter through the back door. It's important. Clara read the message 3 times. What could Antoine know about her grandmother? Why such urgency and secrecy? Something wasn't right. But at the same time, Antoine had always been kind to her, always protected her. Could she trust him? Could she trust anyone? What Clara didn't know was that at that very moment, in the Sterling Group offices, Victor was receiving the report from the investigation he had ordered, and what that report contained not only revealed who Clara Beaumont truly was, it revealed a secret that connected the two families in a way no one would have imagined. A secret that if it came to light would destroy much more than reputations. It would destroy lives. The clock struck 10:40 p.m. when Clara got off the bus 2 blocks from the Golden Maple. The streets were almost empty, barely illuminated by streetlights that cast long shadows on the damp pavement. It had rained during the afternoon, and the air still smelled of wet earth and asphalt. Every step she took towards the restaurant increased the unease in her chest. Antoine's message kept swirling in her head. What could he know about her grandmother? Why so much mystery? Why meet secretly after closing? Before leaving home, Clara had hesitated. Eleanor noticed her uneasiness. Where are you going at this hour, my dear? Antoine asked me to meet him. He says he has important information. The chef? Eleanor frowned. And why can't he tell you over the phone? I don't know, Grandma, but Antoine was always good to me. I trust him. Eleanor had looked at her with those eyes that seemed to see beyond words. Be careful, Clara. In times of war, even friends can inadvertently become enemies. Clara had promised to be cautious, but now, standing in front of the alley leading to the restaurant's back door, her grandmother's words resonated like a warning she perhaps should have heeded more carefully. The alley was dark. The only light came from a lamp above the back door that flickered intermittently as if about to go out. Clara walked slowly, her senses alert, her heart beating faster and faster. The door was ajar. Antoine? She called softly, pushing the door open carefully. The kitchen was in shadow. The stainless steel surfaces gleamed dimly under the emergency light that always remained on. Everything was silent. Too silent. Antoine, are you here? A noise to her right made her turn sharply. A figure emerged from the shadows, but it wasn't Antoine, it was Graham Sterling. Clara's heart stopped for a second before beginning to beat with uncontrolled force. She instinctively recoiled, but another figure appeared behind her, blocking the exit. Victor Sterling. Good evening, Miss Beaumont. Victor's voice was soft, almost kind, which made it even more terrifying. How kind of you to accept our invitation. Where is Antoine? Clara managed to ask, her voice trembling despite her efforts to remain calm. The chef? Graham let out a contemptuous laugh. He's at home, sleeping peacefully. He has no idea we used his name to lure you here. The message had been a trap from the beginning. Clara felt nauseous as she realized how easily she had fallen. What do you want from me? Victor walked slowly towards her, his shoes echoing on the kitchen floor with each step. What I want, Miss Beaumont, is to understand something that has been bothering me since I received a certain report this afternoon. He pulled an envelope from his inside pocket. You see, when I ordered an investigation into you, I expected to find the typical debts, family problems, perhaps some embarrassing secret I could use to pressure you, but what I found was much more interesting. He opened the envelope and pulled out several documents. Did you know that your mother, Rose Beaumont, worked briefly for my father many years ago, before you were born? Clara felt as if the ground moved under her feet. Her mother, she had never known much about her. Eleanor rarely spoke of Rose, and when she did, it was with such deep sadness that Clara had learned not to ask. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course, you don't, because your grandmother made sure to erase that part of the story. Victor smiled coldly. Your mother was beautiful, according to records, intelligent too. My father hired her as a personal assistant when she was just 19. Eleanor already worked for us then, translating documents. I suppose it was she who recommended her daughter. What are you getting at? At the truth, Miss Beaumont. The truth your grandmother has hidden from you your entire life. Graham approached from behind, too close for Clara's comfort. She could feel his breath on her neck, his menacing presence. My father was a man of diverse appetites, Victor continued. And your mother was young, vulnerable, alone in the world, except for her mother, Eleanor. It's not difficult to imagine what happened. You're lying. Clara's voice came out stronger than she expected. My mother died when I was a baby, in an accident. That's what Eleanor told you. Victor shook his head with false compassion. How convenient. The truth is much more complicated. Your mother didn't die in an accident, Miss Beaumont. Your mother disappeared. She left one night without a trace, leaving you with Eleanor. And the reason she left? Well, that has to do directly with my family. Clara felt the world spinning around her. Her mother hadn't died. Eleanor had lied to her entire life. I don't believe you, she said, though her voice no longer sounded so confident. You don't have to believe me. You can ask your grandmother directly, but before you do, allow me to show you something else. He pulled a photograph from the envelope. It was old, yellowed by time. In it appeared a young woman, beautiful, with eyes Clara recognized immediately because she saw them every day in the mirror, her mother. But she wasn't alone in the photo. Beside her, with his arm around her shoulders, was a man Clara also recognized. Arthur Sterling, Victor's father. Your mother and my father had a relationship, Miss Beaumont, a relationship that lasted almost 2 years, and when it ended, well, let's just say the consequences were permanent. The meaning of his words took a moment to penetrate Clara's mind. When it did, she felt as if her heart had been ripped from her chest. No, she whispered, that's not possible. Not possible? Victor laughed softly. Genetics don't lie. Did you never wonder where your knack for languages came from? Eleanor speaks 9. It's true, but my father spoke 12. He was a linguistic genius, a gift he clearly passed on to you. You're lying, Clara screamed, tears beginning to run down her cheeks. This is all a lie to manipulate me. A lie? Victor pulled out another document. This is a DNA analysis my father ordered over 20 years ago. He compared his blood with your mother's when she became pregnant. He wanted to be sure before making certain decisions. He showed the paper to Clara, numbers, percentages, scientific terms she could barely process in her state of shock. According to this analysis, there is a 99.9% probability that Arthur Sterling was your biological father, Miss Beaumont, which means you and I are siblings. The silence that followed was absolute. Clara couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe. The world, as she knew it, had collapsed in a matter of minutes. Of course, Victor continued with a casual tone, my father never officially recognized you. When he discovered the pregnancy, he offered your mother money to disappear. Rose rejected the money, but she disappeared shortly after you were born anyway. No one knows exactly what happened to her. Some say she fled. Others have darker theories. What did you do to her? Clara finally found her voice, hoarse with tears. What did you do to my mother? I didn't do anything to her. I was a child then. But my father was a man who protected his legacy at all costs. An illegitimate child, especially a daughter, would have been a scandal, a stain on his perfect reputation. Graham spoke for the first time since he had revealed his presence. The ironic thing is that for all these years, my grandfather's illegitimate daughter has been serving tables in restaurants, cleaning houses, surviving on crumbs, while we inherited everything that technically also belongs to you. Shut up, Graham. Victor shot him a warning glance. We're not here to discuss inheritances. Then what are we here for? Clara asked, wiping away her tears with fury. To torture me with secrets from the past, to watch me break down. We're here to offer you a deal. Victor put the documents back in the envelope. Now that you know the truth, you have two options. The first, you keep silent about everything, about what you heard in the restaurant, about the hospital plans, about these documents. In return, I will ensure your grandmother receives the best possible medical treatment at no cost, and you will receive a monthly sum that will allow you to live comfortably. And the second option? The second option is that you go ahead with your little crusade for justice, that you speak to journalists, that you try to expose me. But if you choose that path, I will not only destroy your life and your grandmother's, I will also make sure the world knows you are an illegitimate sterling, looking only for money. I will turn your story of struggle into a story of greed, and believe me, I have the resources to do it. Clara stared at him. This man was her brother. They shared blood, they shared a father, but they shared nothing else. He was everything she despised, everything her grandmother had taught her to reject. Why? She asked softly. Why so much hatred? If what you say is true, we're family. For the first time, something changed in Victor's expression. A shadow crossed his face, something that might have been pain or resentment. Family? My father spent his last years obsessed with you, not with his legitimate children, not with the empire he built, but with the daughter he had abandoned. Before he died, he confessed to me that the biggest mistake of his life was not having recognized you, that you were his true heir, not me. The bitterness in his voice was palpable. So don't talk to me about family, Miss Beaumont. You stole my father's love without even knowing it, and now you want to steal everything else from me. I don't want anything from you, Clara said firmly. I just want justice for my grandmother, for my mother, for all the people your family has destroyed. Then you chose the second option. Victor signaled, and two men appeared from the shadow's bodyguards by their appearance. Large, intimidating, with blank expressions of professionals accustomed to unpleasant jobs. Escort Miss Beaumont home. Make sure she understands the consequences of her decisions. Clara felt panic rise in her chest. What were they going to do to her? What were they going to do to her grandmother? But before the bodyguards could touch her, a voice resonated from the kitchen door. Stop! Police! Nobody move! The lights suddenly flashed on, momentarily blinding everyone. Clara blinked, trying to understand what was happening. Several officers entered through different doors, weapons in hand, shouting orders, and behind them, with an expression of contained triumph, was Sarah Miller. What the hell is this? Victor roared. This, Mr. Sterling, is the end of your reign. Sarah approached with a microphone in her hand. Everything you just said was recorded. Every threat, every confession, every detail about what your family did to Rose Beaumont. That's illegal. You can't record without my consent. Actually, we can. When there's suspicion of criminal activity, authorities can authorize surveillance. And thanks to certain documents we received this morning, we had more than enough suspicion. Victor turned to Clara with murderous fury in his eyes. You knew this was going to happen? No. Clara shook her head, as surprised as he was. I didn't know anything. She's telling the truth, Sarah intervened. Clara didn't know about the operation, but someone else did. Someone who has been waiting years to see justice. From behind the officers emerged a figure that made Clara's heart stop. Grandma Eleanor. Her grandmother walked slowly, leaning on her cane, but with her head held high and her eyes shining with a strength Clara had never seen. Grandma, how? When you left tonight, I knew something was wrong. Eleanor spoke with a clear, firm voice. I called Miss Miller. She contacted the authorities, and together, we prepared this. She approached Victor, looking him directly in the eyes without an ounce of fear. For 25 years I kept silent. For 25 years I carried the pain of losing my daughter because of your father. But tonight I heard everything you said, and now the world will hear it too. Victor Sterling, for the first time in his life, was speechless. The officers began to handcuff him while he shouted about lawyers and lawsuits. Graham tried to flee but was apprehended before reaching the door. Clara ran to her grandmother, hugging her tightly. Grandma, is it true what he said about my mother? About Arthur? Eleanor held her, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. It's true, my dear. All of it is true, and the time has come for you to know the whole story. Outside, The sirens of more patrol cars illuminated the night. Inside, two women embraced as decades of secrets finally came to light. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning, but for the first time, Clara felt she wasn't alone, and that made all the difference. The central police station was an old building that smelled of cold coffee and old papers. Clara was sitting in a waiting room with her grandmother, both wrapped in blankets an amiable officer had offered them. Outside, dawn was beginning to paint the sky with pink and orange hues, but neither of them had slept. Sarah Miller had spent the last few hours giving statements, presenting evidence, coordinating with the prosecutors who had arrived urgently when they learned the magnitude of the case. Victor and Graham Sterling were in separate cells, their lawyers already frantically working to secure their bail, but for the moment, they were behind bars, and that was enough. "Grandma," Clara finally broke the silence that had enveloped them for hours. "I need to know everything about my mother, about Arthur, about what really happened." Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength from somewhere deep within her soul. When she opened them, there was a mixture of pain and relief Clara had never seen. "Your mother was the light of my life, Clara. Rose Beaumont had your same smile, your same determination, your same inner fire. When I looked at her, I saw all the good the world could offer." Her voice trembled, but she continued. "I had been working for the Sterlings for 3 years when Rose turned 19. She needed a job, and I thought I could protect her if she worked with me. How wrong I was." Clara took her grandmother's hand, feeling the fragile bones beneath the wrinkled skin. Arthur noticed her from day one. It was impossible not to notice her. Rose had that ability to light up any room she entered. At first, I thought his attentions were simply kindness from an employer to a new employee, but soon I realized it was something more. She loved him. Eleanor sighed deeply. Rose believed she loved him, and perhaps, in his own twisted way, Arthur loved her too. But the love of men like him always comes with conditions, with limits, with secrets. She paused, looking towards the window where the rising sun was beginning to filter golden light. When Rose discovered she was pregnant, Arthur changed completely. The charming and attentive man became cold, calculating. He offered her money to not have the baby. Rose refused. He offered her more money to disappear, to go far away and never contact the Sterling family. Rose also refused that. What did she want? She wanted Arthur to recognize his daughter, to give you his name, his protection, your rightful place in the world. She was naive, my Rose. She thought love could conquer the pride and ambition of a man like him. Tears began to stream down Eleanor's cheeks. "Arthur's wife, Eleanor, discovered the truth shortly after you were born. I don't know how she found out, but she did. And Eleanor was a strong-willed woman. She gave Arthur an ultimatum. Either Rose disappeared from their lives forever, or she would destroy him publicly, ruin his reputation, his business, everything he had built. And what did he do? He chose his empire over his daughter, over you. He told Rose she had to leave, that she could never contact him again, that she could never reveal who her baby's father was. He offered her a considerable sum of money, enough to start a new life in another country." Clara felt a knot in her throat. "But you said she rejected the money." "She rejected it. Rose had pride. Clara, too much pride for her own good. She said she wanted nothing from a man capable of abandoning his own blood, that she preferred to raise her daughter in poverty rather than accept crumbs from someone without honor." Eleanor paused, her breathing becoming more difficult. A week after that conversation, Rose disappeared. Clara's heart stopped. "Disappeared? What do you mean disappeared?" "Exactly that. One night, after putting you to sleep in your crib, she left the apartment saying she was going to buy milk. She never came back. Did you look for her?" "I looked for her for years, Clara. I went to the police, hired private investigators with the little money I had. I put up posters all over the city. No one found anything. It was as if the earth had swallowed her." Clara felt like she couldn't breathe. "Do you think Arthur had something to do with it?" Eleanor took a moment to respond. "For a long time, I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think that the man my daughter had fallen in love with was capable of something like that. But over the years, as I watched the Sterlings destroy anyone who stood in their way, I began to have doubts. Doubts that became suspicions. Suspicions that became certainty. Why did you never tell me? Because I wanted to protect you." Eleanor took Clara's face in her hands. "If you had known the truth, you would have looked for the Sterlings. You would have demanded answers, and they would have destroyed you like they destroyed everyone else. I preferred you to believe your mother died in an accident. At least that way you could have peace." "Peace?" Clara stood up abruptly, frustration and pain mixing in her voice. Do you think I lived in peace believing my mother was dead? Do you think it didn't hurt every holiday without her? Every birthday, every important moment of my life where she should have been? I know, my dear, I know, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I lied to you. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger, braver. I'm sorry for everything. Clara looked at her grandmother, this woman who had sacrificed everything to raise her, who had worked until she was sick to give her a future, who had carried impossible secrets for decades, and despite the pain, despite the betrayal she felt, she couldn't hate her. She knelt in front of her, taking her hands again. I forgive you, Grandma, but I need to know one more thing. Do you think my mother is still alive? Eleanor looked at her with eyes full of a hope she had kept hidden for years. I don't know, Clara, but they never found a body. There was never any proof that she was dead. And there's something I never told you, because I didn't want to give you false hope. What? 5 years ago, I received a letter. No sender, no signature. It just said, she's fine, don't look for her. It was written in French. Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. French? Why in French? Rose spoke French perfectly. I taught it to her when she was a child, just like I taught you. It was our secret language, the one we used when we didn't want anyone else to understand. Did you keep the letter? It's in the leather folder with all the other documents. The door to the room opened, and Sarah Miller entered, looking exhausted but satisfied. Ladies, we have news. The prosecutor has decided to file formal charges against Victor and Graham Sterling. Extortion, threats, and we are investigating possible connections to the disappearance of Rose Beaumont. Clara stood up immediately. They can investigate that? After so many years? There's no statute of limitations for certain crimes, Miss Beaumont. And with the recorded confessions from last night, we have enough to reopen your mother's case. Eleanor let out a contained sob. Truly, after all this time? Truly, ma'am. Sarah approached, placing a gentle hand on the elder woman's shoulder. But we need your full cooperation. All the documents, all the letters. Everything you have saved. I will. Eleanor nodded. Everything, every paper, every photo, every memory. If that helps find my Rose, I'll hand it over without hesitation. Sarah looked at Clara with a serious expression. There's something else you should know. During the interrogation, Graham started talking. It seems he wants to negotiate a reduced sentence in exchange for information. What kind of information? He says he knows what really happened to Rose Beaumont. He says his grandfather Arthur told him the truth before he died, and that Victor also knows it, but has never admitted it. The world seemed to stop. Clara felt her knees weaken. Graham knows where my mother is? We're not sure yet. He could be lying to get a better deal, but the prosecutors are going to question him further. If there's any truth to what he says, we'll find it. The following hours were a whirlwind of statements, signatures, legal procedures. Clara barely understood. Eleanor had to be taken to the hospital for a checkup due to the stress of the night, but doctors confirmed she was stable. While waiting for news in the hospital corridor, Clara received an unexpected call. Miss Beaumont, this is Antoine Dubois. I just heard what happened last night. Are you all right? Chef Antoine? Clara felt relieved to hear a familiar voice. Yes, I'm fine. It was a long night. They told me they used my name to set a trap for you. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. You had no way of knowing. There was a pause on the line. Miss Beaumont, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago, but I was afraid. What are you talking about? I knew your mother, Rose. We worked together briefly many years ago at another restaurant before she started working for the Sterlings. Clara almost dropped the phone. You knew my mother? Yes. She was an extraordinary woman, kind, intelligent, full of life. When I found out who you were, when I saw you for the first time at the Golden Maple, I almost couldn't believe it. You are identical to her, Miss Beaumont. Identical. Why did you never tell me? Because Rose made me promise that if I ever met her daughter, I wouldn't tell her anything until the right time. She told me that someday, when you were ready, the truth would come to light, and that when that happened, I would have to tell you something important. Clara's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. What? Not over the phone. I need to see you in person. Can you come to the restaurant tomorrow morning before it opens? There's something your mother left for you. Something I've kept for over 20 years. My mother left something for me. Yes, and I think it's the key to finding her. The call ended, leaving Clara with more questions than answers. What had her mother left her? How could Antoine have kept such a secret for so long? And why had Rose trusted him that night? As Eleanor slept in her hospital bed, connected to monitors that softly beeped. Clara stayed awake, looking out the window. The city shone with thousands of lights, each representing a life, a story, a secret. Somewhere in that world, perhaps her mother still existed. Perhaps she had spent all these years hidden, waiting for the right moment to return. Or perhaps the letter had been a cruel joke, a false hope designed to torment. It didn't matter. Clara would find the truth, whatever the cost. Her phone vibrated with a message from Sarah. Graham spoke. He says Rose didn't die. He says Arthur sent her away to Europe with a new identity. He says there's proof in a safe deposit box that only Victor can open. Tomorrow we'll try to get a court order. This isn't over, Clara. It's just beginning. Clara read the message 3 times, letting the words sink into her mind. Her mother was alive, or at least had been alive, when Arthur sent her away. Europe, a new identity, a safe deposit box with proof, and Antoine had something her mother had left for her. Something he had kept for over 2 decades, waiting for this moment. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit, but the complete picture was still blurry, incomplete, full of shadows and mysteries. Clara looked at her sleeping grandmother. This woman who had sacrificed everything for her, who had carried impossible secrets to protect her. "I'm going to find her, Grandma," she whispered in the darkness. "I'm going to find Mom, I promise." Outside, the night continued its course, indifferent to the human dramas unfolding beneath its blanket of stars. But inside Clara, something had changed permanently. She was no longer just a waitress struggling to survive. She was a daughter searching for her mother, a granddaughter honoring her grandmother's sacrifice, a woman reclaiming her truth, and nothing and no one would stop her. Not even the ghosts of the past that still remained to be discovered, because, in the Sterling's safe deposit box, secrets waited that no one had imagined. Secrets that would not only change Clara's life, they would change everything she thought she knew about her family, about the Sterlings, and about the night Rose Beaumont disappeared forever. The sun was just beginning to rise when Clara arrived at the Golden Maple. The restaurant looked different in the dawn light, stripped of its glamour, revealing the cracks in the walls and the wear of the years, as if the building itself knew it no longer had to pretend perfection. Antoine awaited her at the back door, the same place where days earlier her nightmare had begun. But this time, the chef had a different expression. It wasn't worry or fear. It was something Clara couldn't quite identify. Nostalgia, anticipation, guilt. "Thank you for coming, Miss Beaumont." His voice was softer than usual. "I know that after everything that happened here, this place must bring back bad memories." "Memories don't scare me, chef. What scares me is not knowing the truth." Antoine nodded slowly and led her inside. They walked through the empty kitchen to a small room at the back that Clara had never noticed. It was barely a storage closet filled with dusty boxes and old utensils. "I worked here for 32 years, Antoine said as he moved boxes. "Long before the Sterlings bought this place. Long before you were born." He stopped in front of a rusted metal box, hidden behind sacks of flour. "When I met your mother, I was just a kitchen helper. Rose sometimes came with Eleanor while she did translations for a businessman who dined here regularly. Your mother was extraordinary. She had that light some people possess, that ability to make everyone around her feel special." "Were you close?" "We were friends, good friends. Rose had no one but Eleanor. And I was alone in the world too. We understood each other." Antoine opened the metal box with a small key he wore around his neck. Inside was a package wrapped in fabric, yellowed by the passage of time. "The night before Rose disappeared, she came to see me. She was scared, but also determined. She told me she had to leave, that she couldn't explain why, but that she needed to ask me a favor." Antoine's hands trembled as he unwrapped the package. "She gave me this. She made me swear I would keep it until her daughter was ready to receive it. She told me, when Clara is strong, when the world can no longer ignore her, then she will know it is time." Inside the package were 3 objects: a letter sealed with red wax, a small photograph, and a passport. Clara took the photograph first. In it appeared Rose, clearly pregnant, smiling at the camera with one hand on her belly. Behind the photo, in elegant handwriting, was written, "For my Clara, the day I knew you would be my greatest gift." Tears began to fall before Clara could stop them. "The passport," Antoine pointed to the document. "Look at it." Clara opened it with trembling hands. It was a French passport, and the name that appeared was not Rose Beaumont, it was Maria Larson. "Your mother had a false identity," Antoine explained. "She had obtained it months before she disappeared. I think she was planning to flee, to start a new life away from the Sterlings. But then, if she had everything prepared, why didn't she take me with her?" "That," Miss Beaumont. I believe the letter explains. Clara looked at the sealed envelope. Her hands trembled so much she could barely hold it. Her whole life, all the unanswered questions, all the emptiness in her heart. Perhaps the answers were there on that yellowed paper, waiting to be read. She broke the seal carefully, as if the envelope could disintegrate at any moment. Inside were several pages written in her mother's handwriting, the same handwriting she had seen in the letter Eleanor kept, Rose's handwriting. Clara began to read aloud, needing to hear her mother's words filling the silence. My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, it means the time has come. It means you are strong, that you are brave, that you are everything I always knew you would be. There are so many things I wish I could have told you in person, so many hugs I wish I could have given you, so many nights I wish I could have been there to comfort you when you cried. But life forced me to choose, and I chose your safety over my happiness. Arthur Sterling is your father. I don't know if you already know this when you read this, but I need you to understand it from my perspective. I loved him, Clara. I loved him with all my naive heart, and he, in his own way, also loved me. But the love of men like him always has limits, and those limits are power and money. When I became pregnant, Arthur offered me money to disappear. I refused. I wanted him to recognize you, to give you your place. I was foolish to think his love was stronger than his ambition. Then his wife, Eleanor, discovered everything, and she was not like Arthur. She was dangerous. She threatened me directly. She told me that if I didn't disappear, she would make sure something bad happened to you, to my baby, to my Clara. I couldn't risk it. I couldn't put you in danger. So I made a deal. I would leave, disappear forever. In return, Eleanor promised that they would never touch you, that they would let you live in peace with your grandmother. Arthur accepted the deal, but with one condition. I could not take you with me. He said you were his blood, that he would not allow his daughter to grow up in poverty in some foreign country. It was the hardest decision of my life, Clara. Leaving you was like tearing my heart from my chest, but I did it because I loved you more than my own life. I left you with Eleanor because I knew she would raise you with love, with values, with the strength I couldn't give you directly. I went to France, took on a new identity, built a new life, but never, not a single day, did I stop thinking about you. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped dreaming of the moment I could see you again. Years ago, when I learned that Arthur had died, I thought of returning. But Victor already controlled everything, and he was worse than his father, more cruel, more ruthless. I was afraid of what he might do to you if I appeared. So I waited. I waited until you were strong enough to face them. I waited until the world saw who you really are. And if you are reading this, it means that moment has arrived. Clara, my love, my life, my reason for being, I am alive. I have been alive all these years waiting for you. And if you want to find me, if you want to meet me, if you can forgive me for leaving you, there is a place in Paris, a small café in Montmartre called Le Refuge de Sam. I go there every Sunday morning, and have for 20 years. I always order the same thing, café au lait and a croissant. I always sit at the same table by the window, and I always look towards the door, waiting for the day my daughter walks through it. I love you, Clara. I loved you from the moment I knew you existed. I will love you until the last breath of my life. Your mother, Rose. Clara finished reading, and the silence that followed was absolute. Tears streamed down her face uncontrollably, falling onto the paper, mixing with words that had waited more than 2 decades to be read. Antoine was crying too, unashamed, without trying to hide it. She's alive, Clara whispered. My mother is alive. She always was, Miss Beaumont, waiting for you, loving you from afar. Clara hugged the letter to her chest, feeling as if her mother's arms enveloped her across time and distance. At that moment, her phone rang. It was Sarah. Clara, we have the court order. They opened the Sterling safe deposit box, and we found something you need to see urgently, something about your mother, something Victor hid for years. Clara looked at Antoine, then the letter, then the passport with the name Maria Larson. I'm on my way. Because her mother's letter had answered many questions, but what awaited in that safe deposit box would reveal that Rose Beaumont's story was much more complex than anyone had imagined, and that Clara's journey was just beginning. The Sterling safe deposit box contained decades of secrets, documents of bribes, illegal contracts, evidence of shady dealings that would make any business empire tremble. But none of that mattered to Clara at that moment. What mattered was a manila envelope with her name written in a hand she would now recognize anywhere, her mother's handwriting. Sarah handed it to her carefully. Victor stored it here years ago. Apparently, Rose sent this letter to Arthur shortly before he died. asking him to deliver it to his daughter. He never did, and Victor decided to bury it along with all the other family secrets. Clara opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet and a recent photograph. In the image appeared a woman with gray hair, bright eyes, and a smile that was exactly like hers. Rose, her mother, alive, real, waiting for her. The letter was brief. "My Clara, if you ever read this, I want you to know that I never stopped fighting for you. Every year on your birthday, I sent letters to your father, asking him to deliver them to you. He never did, but I'm still waiting. I will always wait. Le refuge de Sam every Sunday until my heart stops beating. I love you, Mum." Clara looked at Sarah, then at Antoine, who had arrived with her, and finally made a decision that would change her life forever. "I need to go to Paris." The flight lasted hours that felt like eternities. Eleanor couldn't travel due to her health condition, but she insisted that Clara go. "Go, my dear," she had told her in the hospital, holding her hands tightly. "Go find my Rose, tell her I forgive her, tell her I never stopped loving her, and bring her back home." Sarah handled everything, the tickets, the hotel, the contacts in France who would help if anything went wrong. The report on the Sterlings could wait. This was more important. It was Sunday when Clara arrived in Montmartre. The cobbled streets gleamed under a spring sun. Artists painted on the corners. Musicians played melodies that floated in the air like promises. And there, on a narrow street, was the café her mother had mentioned. Le refuge de Sam, the refuge of souls. Clara stopped in front of the door, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone around her could hear it. What if her mother wasn't there? What if she had stopped going? What if after so many years, she no longer wanted to be found? But then she remembered Eleanor's words. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is acting despite it. She pushed the door and entered. The café was small, cozy, with walls covered in old photographs, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling every corner. There were few people at that early hour. A young couple in a corner, an old man reading the newspaper, and by the window, at a table for two, a silver-haired woman looked out at the street with the expression of someone who has waited a lifetime. Clara couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but look at that woman who was her mother, who had sacrificed everything to protect her, who had spent more than 2 decades waiting for this moment. Then Rose turned her head, their eyes met, and the world stopped. Rose brought a hand to her chest as if her heart threatened to burst out. Her lips trembled, forming a word that didn't quite reach utterance. Tears began to roll down her cheeks as she slowly stood, without taking her eyes off Clara. "Clara," her voice was barely a whisper. "My Clara. Mom." That single word broke the dam that held back decades of pain, of absence, of unexpressed love. Rose ran to her daughter and enveloped her in an embrace that seemed to want to reclaim all the lost hugs, all the goodnight kisses, all the tears she couldn't dry. "My baby," Rose sobbed. "My beautiful baby, you came. You finally came." Clara cried too, clinging to her mother as if afraid she would disappear again. "I found you, Mom, I found you." They remained embraced for minutes that seemed like hours, while the other cafe patrons watched, moved, not fully understanding what they were witnessing, but feeling the magnitude of the moment. When they finally separated, Rose took Clara's face in her hands, studying every detail as if she wanted to memorize every line, every expression. "You're beautiful," she whispered. "More beautiful than I ever imagined. And those eyes. You have my eyes and your grandmother's smile." "Grandma Eleanor? How is my mother?" "She's waiting for you. She's sick, but she's fighting. She wants to see you, Mom. She wants you to come home." Rose closed her eyes, fresh tears escaping. "Can she forgive me? After I abandoned her. She forgave you a long time ago. She just wants to hug you one more time." They sat together at the table by the window, the same table where Rose had waited for 20 years. And they talked. They talked for hours, sharing stories, filling voids, building bridges over the abyss of time that had separated them. Rose told about her life in Paris, how she had worked as a translator using the languages Eleanor had taught her, how she had built a small but dignified life, how every Sunday she came to this cafe hoping to see her daughter walk through that door. Clara told about her life, about Eleanor raising her with unwavering love, about learning 7 languages, listening to her grandmother, about working as a waitress, being humiliated, and finally finding her voice. "You answered in German." Rose laughed through tears when Clara told the story. "Of course you did. You're my daughter and Eleanor's granddaughter, the 2 strongest women I know." As the sun began to set over Paris, painting the sky with golden and pink hues, Rose took Clara's hands. "And now what? Now you come home with me. Grandma needs you. I need you. There's no one to hide from anymore, Mom. The Sterlings are finished. Victor and Graham will face justice for everything they did. And you deserve to get your life back. Rose looked out the window at the city streets that had been her refuge for so long. I spent over 20 years running, Clara, hiding, living half a life, because the other half of my heart was with you. Can I really go back? Can I really start over? Not start over, Mom. Continue. Continue from where we were unfairly separated. Continue being a family. Weeks later, at the city airport, Eleanor waited in a wheelchair, surrounded by Sarah, Antoine, and the medical team who had insisted on accompanying her. When the international arrivals gates opened, and Clara appeared, holding the arm of a silver-haired woman, the cry that escaped Eleanor was purely animal. The sound of a mother finding her lost daughter. Rose ran to her, kneeling in front of the wheelchair, taking her mother's hands. Mom, forgive me. Forgive me for leaving you. Forgive me for everything. Eleanor hugged her with the little strength she had left, but with all the love she had stored for decades. There's nothing to forgive, my dear. You're here. You're alive. That's all that matters. Clara watched the scene, tears streaming down her cheeks. 3 generations of Beaumont women finally reunited. 3 women who had survived impossible losses, terrible injustices, and cruel separations, but who had never, ever stopped loving each other. Sarah published her report weeks later. The story of the Sterlings and their downfall was national news for months. Victor and Graham were convicted of multiple charges, losing not only their freedom, but the entire empire they had built on lies and cruelty. Maplewood General Hospital was saved thanks to a coalition of ethical investors Sarah helped bring together. Eleanor was able to continue her treatment without worries, now surrounded by her daughter and granddaughter. Clara received job offers from international translation agencies, prestigious universities, and humanitarian organizations that wanted to leverage her gift for languages, but she chose something different. She founded a free language school for underprivileged youth, teaching in the same way Eleanor had taught her, with patience, with love, with the certainty that knowledge is the most powerful weapon against injustice. She named it the Rose Eleanor Beaumont School. One spring afternoon, Clara was sitting in the garden of her new house, watching her mother and grandmother converse under the shade of a tree. Eleanor laughed at something Rose said, a sound Clara thought she would never hear. Rose noticed her gaze and smiled, extending a hand to her. "Come here, my dear. Sit with us." Clara joined them, sitting on the grass between the 2 women she loved most in the world. "You know what I learned from all this," she said softly. "What, my love?" Eleanor asked. "That the most important language isn't German or French or any of the 7 I speak. The most important language is love, and that I learned from you." Rose and Eleanor exchanged a look, their eyes shining with tears of happiness. "And you speak it perfectly, my dear." Rose kissed her forehead. "You speak it perfectly." The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky with the same golden and pink hues Clara had seen in Paris the day she found her mother. But now those colors had a different meaning. They were no longer the end of a day, they were the beginning of a new life. A life where 3 women the world had tried to separate were finally together. A life where truth had triumphed over lies. A life where love had conquered power. And that life, Clara knew with absolute certainty, was the best ending she could ever have imagined. Because it wasn't really an ending, it was the beginning of everything it always should have been.